I call to order the March 10, 2020 meeting of the Portsmouth City Council. And I'll ask my colleagues on the dais to rise and stand with me as I give the invocation. Then I'll ask everybody to rise as Councilman Bill Moody leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance. O God, you have bound us together in a common life. We ask that your Holy Spirit move within our hearts so as to melt and eliminate the barriers which may divide us so that we can live in justice and peace. And please give us, the members of this City Council, the wisdom to effectively address the needs of our citizens of our great city during our meeting tonight. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll proceed on our agenda with our roll call, and this will be done electronically, so I'll have to ask the members of council to indicate your presence this evening by hitting the yes button. Madam Clerk, we have 100%? We
Yes,
have
sir.
a quorum. Next is the consideration of the adoption approval of minutes. We have the minutes of a call meeting of February 24th, 2020, the minutes of a call meeting of February 25th, 2020, and the minutes of a regular meeting of February 25th, 2020. We'll consider this with one motion for all three sets of minutes.
move adoption.
We have a motion that's been duly made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Ready for the question? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And Madam Clerk, that motion carries.
Yes, sir.
Madam Clerk, will you read the protocol for speakers, please?
Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, City Council rules require a limit of up to 5 minutes to speak. As you approach the speaker's podium, you will notice a timer. At the beginning of your 5 minutes, you will see a green light. 4 minutes into your remarks, you will notice a yellow light. At the end of 5 minutes, you will see a red light, hear a beep, and we ask that you conclude your comments at that time. While speakers have an opportunity to address council on matters of public concern, all comments should be made in a manner that respects the seriousness of the forum and should not be made in a belligerent, sarcastic, or demeaning fashion. All remarks shall be directed to the City Council as a body rather than to any particular member of City Council, staff, or the audience, and should be limited to matters that only the Portsmouth City Council can influence. A speaker who fails to observe this basic rule of decorum will be deemed out of order and not allowed to conclude his or her comments.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll now proceed to item 20-97, which is the consideration of the adoption of a certain ordinance. And Madam Clerk, will you read the caption of that ordinance, please?
Yes, sir. An ordinance accepting funding from the Virginia Department of Social Services in the amount of $3,000 and appropriating said amount in the FY 2020 Social Services Fund for the Family Partnership Meeting Incentive Program.
So that we can put this matter before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt?
Move for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion that's been duly made and seconded to adopt the motion, the ordinance. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we're ready for the question. All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. Madam Clerk, that motion carries.
Yes, sir.
We're at item number 20-98, and that's the consideration of the adoption of another ordinance. And Madam Clerk, will you read the caption of that ordinance, please?
Yes, sir. An ordinance accepting title to 387 Quebec Street in the Sugar Hill section of the city from the Economic Development Authority and authorizing the payment of $31,070 from the Stormwater Fund to reimburse EDA for the cost of its acquisition of the property.
Thank you, ma'am. So that we can put this matter before us for our consideration, is our motion to adopt. We have a motion that's been duly made and seconded, which is to adopt the ordinance. Any discussion? We're ready for the discussion. And we do have two speakers. And the first speaker is Mark Godalgi-Otrosky. And, sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of council, and fellow interested parties. It seems counterintuitive in a city that has a lot of property that's off the tax rolls to be buying a piece of property and let it lie fallow. But it's the times we live in. In a time of rising sea levels, it is a defensive measure for us to take a piece of property that is threatened by that rise in sea level and ensure that nothing will be put on it. So we are protecting ourselves from future loss. We are also protecting nearby properties from future loss because this property will act as a buffer against rising waters. So whoever on staff made the determination that this is, in this era of rising sea level, the best use for the property in question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Donna Sy. And, ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Donna Sy, and I live in the Woodbine Farms neighborhood. I oppose this agenda item 20-98. This ordinance is for the city to accept title to 387 Quebec Street from the Economic Development Authority. The city is authorizing the payment of over $31,000 to be taken from the Stormwater Fund to reimburse EDA for the cost of 387 Quebec Street. This property is owned by Mr. William Brown, as was reported to me from the city assessor's office. Why is the name on the city assessor's records not EDA? Why is the money being taken out of the stormwater fund? There's flooding in many areas of the city. How come the people's tax-paying money is being used for the city's benefit and not the people's benefit? To fix the flooding all over the city instead of buying more property. Look at areas in Ebony Heights where there's ditches clogged up with dirt. Look at the other areas in the city that has flooding. Carver Circle had dirt in the street gutters from flooding that had to be shoveled out. The storm drains all over the city are all clogged up with debris and causes flooding. The city legislators are going to approve taking money out of the stormwater fund and pay for property that belongs to someone else. Have the legislators consulted with the civic leagues in the city if they give their consent to spend their money that they pay to put in the stormwater fund? Do not spend the people's money until you obtain their consent on this agenda item. If you vote yes without the people's consent, this is called taxation without representation. I'd like to review a little bit about the Virginia Constitution Bill of Rights. In the Section 1, it says that all men are by nature equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights of which, when they enter into a state of society, they cannot by any compact deprive or divest their prosperity, namely, the enjoyment of life and liberty with the means of acquiring and possessing property and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. Section 2 says that we, the people, are the source of power, and that all power is vested in and consequently derived from the people, and that elected are their trustees and servants, and at all times capable of correction. In Section 3, that government is or ought to be instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the people, nation, or community. of all the various modes and forms of government that is best, which is capable of producing the greatest degree of happiness and safety, and is most effectually secured against the dangers of maladministration. And whenever any government shall be found inadequate or contrary to these purposes, a majority of the community hath unquestionable and cannot be transferred an indefensible right to reform, alter, or abolish it in such manner as such be judged most conducive to the public prosperity. That's our money you're spending. Ask us permission.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, we're ready for the question. All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And Madam Clerk, that motion carries.
Yes, sir.
We're now at item 20-99, which is the consideration of the adoption of a certain resolution. And Madam Clerk, will you read the caption of that resolution, please?
Yes, sir. A resolution certifying the City of Portsmouth support for the demolition and revitalization of the former Cogentric site, including through acceptance of a Port Host Communities Revitalization Fund grant from the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development, and further authorizing the execution of a cooperation agreement with the Portsmouth Port and Industrial Commission related to the project and the grant.
Thank you, ma'am. So that we can put this matter before us for our consideration, is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move for adoption.
We have a motion on the floor that's been duly made and seconded. We're ready for discussion, and we do have one speaker, and that's Mark Godalgi-Yatrowski. And sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of council, and fellow interested parties. I want to tip my hat to our Legislative Affairs Director, Ms. Sherry Neal, for her efforts to get the enabling legislation that made this grant possible through the General Assembly. The ports are a mixed blessing. The way they are administered in the Commonwealth of Virginia, they tie up land that actually has been parts of several of our cities, take that land off the tax rolls, generate a great deal of economic activity and revenue for the Commonwealth. And the host communities have historically not benefited commensurate with the loss of tax revenue that this arrangement has provided. In this case, Portsmouth stands to derive a significant benefit from that port activity, and in being a party to this grant, will have the ability to redevelop an industrial site of good size in the city of Portsmouth that has stood idle for a very long time. So it is likely that we will see an influx of much needed tax revenue as a result of this particular turn of events. So thanks to Ms. Sherry Neal, and thanks to the efforts that created this opportunity for us.
Thank you, sir. Any further discussion on the motion, which is to adopt the resolution? Hearing none, ready for the question. All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. Madam Clerk, that motion carries.
Yes, sir.
Which brings us to new business, boards and commissions.
Mayor, there are no appointments to consider tonight.
Good. We now are at item 20-101, item submitted by council, and we do have an item that's on the agenda, a resolution. And Madam Clerk, will you read the caption of the resolution, please?
Yes, sir. A resolution authorizing and directing the closure of the Crawford Street Jail on or before August 15, 2020.
The format for this matter, will first have a briefing by the city attorney, then the chair will entertain a motion, and then we'll open it up for discussion. And at that part in our deliberation, we'll receive the people who've asked to speak to this matter. And so with that, Mr. City Attorney, if you would proceed with your briefing.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council. I am before you today to provide the status of the pending litigation and the city's posture as it pertains to the Civic Center Jail. The City of Portsmouth stands at a juncture where it must determine its ability to respond to current and future challenges. The question before City Council this evening is, can the city forego a 20-year jail facility that was approved and paid for that's being paid for within the city's debt capacity? And can the city forego its vision and decisions for the future by authorizing a double-digit multi-year tax increase or a violation of the city's debt policy? And so tonight, as part of this discussion, I want to present where the city is and what it's done over the last few months. From December 2019 to today, the City of Portsmouth has assessed and reassessed the legal liabilities for the City of Portsmouth given the current circumstances at the Civic Center Jail. We've also assessed the financial status of the city and the financial requirements for the city to conform to current court orders and the conditions present at the Civic Center Jail. Tonight, I present to you an assessment of the path forward for the future of the City of Portsmouth, the City Council, and its residents. Let me begin where this all began. As you may recall, in early 2019, City Council received several presentations concerning the operations of the Civic Center Jail as well as the operations of the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. At the conclusion of those presentations made by the sheriff and the superintendent, the City Council requested an assessment of the Civic Center Jail. There were three assessments made, one by PACE Collaborative, which was a mechanical, electrical, and other systems assessment. There was a structural assessment conducted by Clark Nexon, and there was an asbestos evaluation conducted by Applied Laboratory Services. Let's discuss those assessments in some detail. First, let me discuss the PACE Collaborative assessment, and I will just cover the salient points with regard to the economic impact of those reports. In the PACE Collaborative report, there were a number of immediate repair needs identified that equated to approximately $770,000 in repairs necessary for the Civic Center and the jail specifically. There was also a number of ongoing repairs necessary for the ongoing use of the facilities over at the Civic Center. That total was $14.58 million in construction costs and approximately $3.58 million in design fees and contingencies for a total of approximately $18.16 million. Clark Nexon conducted a structural assessment. In that assessment, they were identifying repairs necessary to address moisture infiltration as well as other structural and concrete repairs that were necessary for the facility. In the Clark-Nixon report, you see a page here. There were $4.36 million identified as immediate repair needs and approximately $36.42 million for additional structural repairs. Now, the Clark-Nixon report was rather detailed in terms of what structures required repairs, and so here we have the a second page from that report that addresses the needs. And for the purposes of the discussion as it relates to the Civic Center jail, the salient repairs were $6.4 million in necessary repairs for the plaza level, $8.67 million in repairs for the jail, $7.06 million necessary for the garage. And as I mentioned to you all yesterday, the mechanical systems, the central boiler, and many of the electrical systems that serve the jail are actually below grade level of the parking under the basement of both the jail and the Civic Center. In this slide and the following slide is a portion of the Applied Laboratory Services assessment and report of repairs. There are also sections addressed within that report. The total proposed repairs for asbestos abatement is approximately $2.3 million, although the vast majority of those expenses do not pertain to the jail or the garage. Let's talk about the assessments. As many of you are aware, those assessments, once they were received by the City of Portsmouth, those formed a basis for a condemnation that the City of Portsmouth sought to condemn the Civic Center in general and the jail in specific. It should also be noted that those same reports were appended to an action filed by Sheriff Moore and relied on by Sheriff Moore in a court filing in order to request or require repairs of the jail in an action filed against the city. So as we sit here today, the City of Portsmouth has been party to 4 civil actions seeking to address the future of the jail operation. At the conclusion of 2 of those civil actions, Portsmouth Circuit Court issued an order that stated, and the italicized section is a verbatim citation out of that order, the condemnation of the Civic Center jail is denied. The city is ordered to maintain the Portsmouth City Jail in a manner that is secure and adequate for housing inmates so long as the facility is used as a jail by the city. In the course of the litigation, the sheriff as well as the city presented a number of witnesses. The sheriff did in fact present some witnesses to challenge the conditions presented in the city's reports. Some of those conditions and some of those opinions have proven to be misplaced. Let me just talk about one. In August of 2019, the sheriff put forth an expert to discuss the condition of the boilers that serve the jail. At that time, you'll see at the tail end of the middle paragraph, note with proper maintenance, these boilers will last another 10 to 15 years before replacement is required. As you all are aware, those boilers did not last the 10 to 15 years from August 2019. The system's primary boiler failed on February 7th. The city is in the process of making repairs in accordance with the court order at an expense of estimated at $130,000 to $145,000. This body has asked, and this city has moved forward with regard to settlement discussions in alignment with certain directives set forth by the city council. The city has also had settlement discussions with a recognition of the fiscal realities that exist for this city, as well as the legal liabilities that must be eliminated to the greatest extent possible so that we can resolve those matters. So as we come here today, I want to speak to where we are as a city and where we go. Where are we today? The standing court order requires that the city continue repairs to the Civic Center jail without a monetary limitation. We are moving forward with those requirements in regular and due order. New construction and repair estimates have been ranging from $31 to $47 million. As you all know, your financial advisors, Davenport, made a presentation about new jail and repair costs and the impact in terms of what the financial impact would be for the city. Those dollar amounts exceed the city's current debt capacity. You also have received information, and there was testimony during the first two, I believe it was the second hearing, that the city currently pays $16,112.50 per day, which equates to approximately $5.9 million per year to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail for its contractual obligation to fill 250 beds. At last count, only 35 of those beds were filled. I'm sure that you all have heard over the last few days and the last few weeks, there were some issues with regard to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail and the Board of Corrections. I attach here a response from the Board of Corrections that the issues with regard to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail have been resolved, and I believe that's the chairman of the Board of Corrections issued a letter to that effect to the superintendent in the last few weeks. One of the issues identified in the city's report with regard to issues over at the Civic Center Jail was the fire system. Testing of the fire system is essential, as I've said to you all, essential to addressing the city and city employees' liability under both state law and federal civil rights law. Some of those tests have been conducted. There are repairs in line, and there will have to be some additional testing to see if in fact, the protection system, fire protection system can be reinstalled. As we sit here today, the sprinkler system in the garage beneath the Civic Center is out of commission, and so there's no parking under the garage at this point. And we are dealing with the repairs for that. As you all have received reports from your liaisons to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail, the Hampton Roads Regional Jail is finalizing its resolution of issues with regard to the Department of Justice reports that have been pending. And with that, let me talk a little bit about the repairs and the issues with regard to the conditions of the Civic Center Jail. Virginia law establishes that, well, let me first talk about repairs. As many of you know, we discuss capital improvements as it relates to our city's budget. Capital improvement is a physical asset in an amount of $50,000, generally an item that is expected to last some 10 years. When we discuss capital expenditures, those are matters that typically come before you as a city council to approve capital investments. The case cited there, Brown versus Mitchell, is a civil rights case, a federal civil rights case coming out of Richmond. And as we have discussed, the courts in Virginia have established that the city council is the legislative body for which policy is established in terms, final authority for policy is established as it relates to function, operation of jails, local jails. And with that, given that you all have the authority to make the capital expenditures, when there is a issue of deficiency with regard to a capital asset, for lack of a better word, the buck stops with the city council. Although the city manager may administer a capital improvement project, program, and budget, and she may offer items there too, it is ultimately determined by the approval of the city council. So with that being said, the issue before city council as it relates to the Civic Center jail is, in order to make the required repairs to the jail or to build a new jail, this city council would have to do one of two things. You would have to act before your budget is put in place in order to establish a tax increase of up to 61 cents in a single year in order to cover the costs of the estimates between $31 and $47 million for repairs to the Civic Center jail. Now, there is certainly, that is a single year number. It could be multi-year, but the dollar amount and the tax rate is the same. Otherwise, city council would have to act to authorize the city manager to issue debt in the amount of $31 million to $47 million, which would cause either a violation of the city's debt capacity and their debt policy as it exists for the city of Portsmouth. Here I attach for your benefit a copy of the order issued by Portsmouth Circuit Court. If you'll look at the bottom of the first page and carry over to the top of the second page, it speaks to the language I recited to you early on with regard to the need to upkeep the jail as long as it's operating by the city as a jail. And it also speaks to the issue of continued discussions to try to resolve pending matters. So where do we go? As I have said to you, in order to prevent a financial strain, it's necessary for the city to appeal the opinions that have been issued by the court. There has been a notice of appeal filed in the previous court order in order to preserve the city rights. Also, the city council is putting forward that it's necessary to move to immediately close the jail on or before August 15, 2020. And in effect, with that closure, transfer the residents of the Portsmouth Civic Center Jail to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. And why do we say that? One, the Civic Center Jail, as I said earlier on, is currently being paid for within the city's debt limit policy. It would not require a violation of debt policy in order to have the residents transferred there. Second, it would not require a multi-year double-digit tax increase in order to address the $31 to $47 million of repairs or for the preparation of a new facility. It would provide you all an opportunity to address other civic needs and operational needs if the double-digit multi-year tax increase is not required, and it would eliminate the liabilities associated with the current Civic Center jail. This position and your considerations tonight are not new and not novel. In August 14th of 2012, the City Council of Portsmouth, in a resolution, found and determined that it was in the public interest to demolish the Civic Center as soon as practicable. In that same resolution, the city manager was charged to develop options for relocating inmates from the present city jail to another location or locations so that the entire Civic Center, including the jail, could be demolished. City Council in that resolution also made particular findings which are still correct today, and that is that the operation of the Civic Center, its systems including water, sanitary sewer, HVAC, electrical, communications, parking are interconnected between the various structures, making it very difficult to leave the present jail in place while demolishing the rest of the Civic Center. And with that, Mayor, Vice Mayor, that is the completion of the briefing for your resolution that is before you tonight.
Okay, the format that we'll follow so that we're following Robert's Rules of Order. We'll get this matter before us with a motion to adopt the resolution. We'll get that on the floor, and then I'll open it up for discussion. We'll take the people who have signed up first, and then once we have that, council will discuss. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion that's been duly made and seconded. We're ready for discussion. And we have registered speakers. We have several, and I'll call them in the order that they have signed up. The first speaker is Barry Randall, and sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor Rowe, Vice Mayor Lisa Lucas Burke, members of council, Barry Randall from the Prentice Park section of Portsmouth. I'm here tonight in favor of hopefully you guys doing the right thing and keeping our jail open. Some 200 people will be affected by that. It's sad that we have to come to this, but let's be honest. If our former sheriff was still sheriff, would we be at this table having this discussion in reference to closing the jail? And I find it very disheartening for us to be here when this isn't a black or white issue. There's so many families that will be affected by this, white families, black families, Latinos, so many various races, and yet we are here to make a decision looking not even an hour and a half up the road to see what Petersburg did and the mistakes that they have admitted to making. And now we're here today, and I'm saying to myself, and I know the new rules that you all have adopted to try to kind of keep me from speaking, but 4 of you are voting in blocks as opposed to voting your conscience. 2 of you, you have nothing to lose because this is it for you in November. 1 of you, you still have a year left. So I am appealing to the other, and that person know who they are, because I was told we can't mention names anymore. So to that individual, it's funny because I saw a black gentleman earlier today in Food Lion, and he said, man, I know you're going down there to talk to help keep this jail open. What they doing? I thought they was this, I thought they was that, and I know him. I said, why you asking me? You need to call your council person. You was in support when they was toting guns. And he laughed and he said to me, he said, yeah, I thought it was all right, but you know, this jail thing, that's not right. My mama told me don't fool with them. My mama told me don't vote for them. And females are the backbone in our community, in the African American community. our mothers, our grandmothers, our aunts, and so many others. And one thing that you have to learn about us is that if we don't listen to anybody else, guess who we listen to? Our mothers and our grandmothers and our aunts. But that's not the problem that you all have, because us listening to them isn't your issue. Your issue is something that our president have paved the way for with what he's done with the evangelicals and allowing them to speak politics from the pulpit. Because guess who our mothers listen to? They listen to people like Reverend Turner and Reverend Joe B. Fleming and Reverend Joe A. Fleming and Reverend Mariner and Reverend Blunt and Reverend Beeman, Reverend Whitakers, Bishop Williams, another great bishop that boasts some 10,000 members in our region, Bishop Kim Brown, who went to school, I believe, with our sheriff. So that's the problem that you all have on your hand. Because if there's a campaign to be had this year, the campaign will be with the preachers, letting them know, pull the covers down and call the persons by name who do not vote our interests, who do not support our community, who's doing a favor for a friend who is no longer in office and is bitter because they lost. And therefore, you all are willing to snatch food and shelter from individuals. But I'm gonna always be the bigger person. There's people in this room that I've already offered my support to. I will, for city council, I will rescind my support, and I'll work with that last individual who needs to do the right thing tonight. We don't have to look alike to agree. We don't have to think alike to agree. But I'm willing to be the bigger person if you are willing to be the bigger person. Because when you look at those that are running for office, you have a problem. If you look at your numbers, what you won with, then you have someone that's running for council who's an incumbent who won with 21,000 votes. Then you have someone from school board running for the same office that won with over 18,000 votes. Then you have another incumbent running from school board who won with over 16,000 votes. There's only 3 seats. So unless you plan on leaving, because this is Dr. Patton's last year, this is 2 of them last year, and we coming for that other person when their time is up. So unless you plan on leaving with them, do the right thing.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Sheriff Michael Moore. And, sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Sheriff Michael Moore, City of Portsmouth. Mr. Ashby gave a display of the dollars and cents, what it would cost. I would like to concentrate on the human toll. I would like to first effect the resolution in closing the city jail is 5 key points. Number 1, and excuse me, public, good evening. Deputies and civilians will lose their jobs. Also lost will be part-time security that the deputies work when they're off duty, which affects the security of the city of Portsmouth. It is difficult for me to understand wanting to lay off law enforcement personnel in a city that is currently number 1 in the state of Virginia in violent crime. It's just inconceivable to me when you think about putting law enforcement officers out of work. And I know what the thought pattern has been. If you move the inmates to the regional jail, deputies go with it. It's completely different between correctional officers and deputies. It's a completely different game altogether. Number 2, and this again is the human toll. Senior citizens and disabled residents will lose services provided by the Portsmouth Sheriff's Office. A few of those services, of course, everyone knows about the grass maintenance that we provide to our seniors and disabled. But also, we build handicap ramps at no cost to the citizens of this city. Medical transport, we also assist in feeding the hunger, and those are just a few of the things that we provide to the citizens of our city. We also cut grass at every fire station in this city, and we also wash the city vehicles. And one of the other things that we constantly do for our citizens, as well as our civic leagues and churches, anytime they have a special event, we provide a tent for those events. All of that will go away. Number 3, and this is hugely important also, programs like our DARE program that we just started last year, which assists in educating our youth about the dangers of making wrong decisions that may lead to criminal activity. And our reentry program, which is up and running now for the last 18 months, which help better prepare our incarcerated citizens, thereby, when they return to their neighborhoods and their communities, hopefully the chances of them recurring criminal activity is limited. So that's an important thing that we started since I've been in office. Number 4, because of an outdated agreement the city has with the Hampton Roads Regional Jail, where you want to force me to send inmates to a facility that has been classified as unconstitutional in violation of inmates' 8th and 14th Amendments, constituting cruel and unusual punishment. That was the conclusion of the DOJ report that came out in December 2018. Currently, DOJ has not released a finding to describe where the Hampton Roads Regional Jail is at this point. But also that's new, also currently, Department of Corrections has threatened to decertify the facility. And Mr. Ashby showed one of the segments on the screen. That is in reference to, finally, the Hampton Roads Regional Jail has released the information to the Department of Corrections that they have been requesting for many, many months as it related to jail deaths. So that is just the information that they've been seeking. The investigation is really in the early primary stages. Lastly, you all have shown a complete disregard for the rule of law and the truth. You have falsely stated to repair the jail would be upwards of $31 million. That's not true. Our estimate is $200,000 or less. With arrogance and disrespect, you have ignored the judge's ruling, which that ruling was ordering the city to make the necessary repairs after years of neglect. Now, Mr. Ashby mentioned earlier about the sprinkler system in the basement. During a test in the jail last week, the sprinkler system was leaking. The sprinkler system in that jail basement has not been inspected since 2002. I mean, that is constant neglect of the city with all the structures in the city. And what was heartbreaking for me just a few weeks ago, I was at the hospital visiting my father-in-law, and when I pulled out the back parking lot of Maryview Hospital, Willard Hall is being demolished. I mean, it is the responsibility of the city to maintain things that you're responsible for. And no longer than just a year ago, Mr. Ashby just became aware that the city was responsible for the maintenance of the jail. How can a city official only have that knowledge once this process started? So to me, it's just inconceivable. I don't like coming down here, but I can tell you one thing. I promise you, I would never stop fighting for my employees. I would never stop fighting for the citizens of this city, and I would never, ever stop fighting for the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Sergio O'Neill. Our next speaker is Sergio O'Neill, and sir, you have 5 minutes. Sergio O'Neill.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, and the general public. My name is Sergio O'Neill, and I reside in the Cavalier Manor section of this city. First and foremost, I have to echo the comments of Sheriff Michael Moore. Some of you all may know, some of you all may not. I sit on the board of the Mann Foundation that has worked tirelessly with the jail's reentry program, has made a lot of segue with those inmates. Well, let me not say inmates. Let me say those citizens, because regardless of where they are, they're still citizens of this city. I think it's very disheartening to see our city once again in a position where we have our city leadership going back and forth, playing mind games or whatever the case might be with the citizens of this city. I think all of us who are citizens right now are about tired and fed up with it. We need to know the truth about this jail. We need to get the proper protocols in place, and we need to make sure that our staff that's in that jail, as well as our inmates, are put in a position that works best for everybody. Whatever deal that has been made, whatever somebody, big real estate person that wants to come in and take this down, they're going to have to wait until we get our people straight first before they get any deal going on. Because guess what? The citizens of this city come first before any big real estate or anything else. We're tired of being in the news for stuff like this. Every other Hampton Roads city around us is seeming to work together with all of their city departments to make their cities grow. Let's put it into perspective. The city that looks like Portsmouth, Hampton has changed it around in such a very few many years because they were in the same position as this city. And we're somehow or another, they figured it out, but we're still struggling. What is the problem? If we knew this jail was going down in 2012, as the report said, then why not we do something to maintain it so we can, until we get the funds in place to have a new jail built when the new courthouse was built? It seems to be a little asinine that we're playing reactive versus proactive. I think it's very disheartening that we're in this position where we have family versus family. People, all of us have to live and work together in this city, but it's really crazy. Like, what are we going to stop saying, okay, we're going to stop playing politics and we're going to start working together? Let's make the example for the people that have to live in this city, that have to inherit this city. We have a lot of people in Portsmouth of the older population, but people like me and my age bracket, some of the decisions that are being made right now, we have to inherit this. And I can tell you right now, it's a struggle for some of us to even get up in the morning on time. So you got to think about what the foundation you all are laying for us as up and coming younger citizens that have to inherit situations like this. Why is it that, and I can tell you right now, as a member of the Community Criminal Justice Board, I was kind of shocked to see that we're in this position with our jail. Because guess what? That jail, other services are affected too. Some of the services that Sheriff Michael Moore said, but also too, what about pretrial services and stuff like that? How is that going to work for those inmates once they're, not inmates, citizens, once they're moved to the Hampton Roads Regional Jail? How's that process going to work? That we're already struggling trying to get those citizens to take pretrial services now. What if you change their environment? What is that number going to look like? The director sitting right back there, Mr. Warren is sitting right back there. I'm quite sure he might have that answer to that question if he's not already looking into it. These are situations that affect, there are more things that with some of the stuff that has come out tonight. We look at it in dollars and cents, but guess what? If that number is true, with the $200,000, we could have got that done a long time ago. Are we looking at contractors trying to inflate money to get a kickback on the end with a $31 million, whatever that estimate was to build a new jail, or is it somebody that we need to get with this $200,000? As a person that has been in charge of maintenance and repair before, I would have took the $200,000 well before the $31 million to get this stuff, to keep it rolling. We can't be in this position all the time. And I urge you all to let's stop playing these games. Let's get a plan in place to make it work for everybody, and let's stop embarrassing the city of Portsmouth. Please and thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Mark Yodolgi-Trotsky. And, sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of council, and fellow interested parties. I regret to say that I am here to support the resolution, but I'm also here to express the reasons why I regret supporting it. Because in the 48 years that I've lived in Hampton Roads, half in Norfolk and half in Portsmouth, unquestionably the best sheriff I have ever seen is the one who currently holds that office in Portsmouth. And in my view, had the city been interested in resolving this situation rather than in asserting that it was in charge, we wouldn't be at this point with our backs to the wall. I believe that the Hampton Roads Regional Jail is the best option for the city and its taxpayers in terms of housing the people in custody today. It's a relatively new facility. It sits in the city of Portsmouth, so it doesn't impose major hardships on people visiting their loved ones who are in detention. At the same time, we have a very dedicated force of sheriff's deputies, many of whom will not have jobs the way the current agreement with the jail is structured. If we move those people housed in our jail here to the regional jail. What I submit you should be doing in the course of the next 5 months is renegotiating our agreement with the Hampton Roads Jail so that the sheriff and his people can do the job that they're doing now, just at the other location. I recognize that this is something different from what is done elsewhere and what has been done in the past. But unless there is some legal obstacle to making that happen, it seems to me to be a way to salvage this situation. The fact that Sheriff Moore would be overseeing the custody of people from Portsmouth who are incarcerated there would, I believe, improve the conditions that have been cited by the Department of Justice and the Department of Corrections, because we have a dedicated, capable person to ensure that it's a safe setting for those incarcerated. And the experience and dedication of those deputies who are currently performing that function would also be insurance that people would be housed in a safe setting. Are you willing to go that extra mile to bring about a good outcome from what currently is a disaster? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Pam Phillips. And ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. My name is Pamela Phillips. I live in the Parkview neighborhood of Portsmouth. I do not support this resolution, partially being a mechanical engineer, understanding what those reports say, understanding that those estimates at in some regards were probably egregious. And there are other alternatives to doing the repairs that Sheriff Moore has looked into. There's a huge discrepancy between $31 million to perform the necessary repairs and $200,000. More than likely, those repairs are somewhere in between those. But that doesn't mean that there aren't immediate repairs that don't need to be made now. The fire system and pump that apparently hasn't been tested since 2002 is a huge one. We're talking about a system that is supposed to continue to run while that building is on fire so that everyone possible can be evacuated. Supposed to run on its own, kick off. So this is a huge lifeline that will help both maintain a quality or get people out of that building, but on top of that, assist in the fire department if something that problematic were to happen in this facility. On top of that, we're talking about if we're going to the regional jail to actually house our incarcerated citizens there into a facility that we know has Department of Justice violations, is in the news, it seems, every couple of weeks. We have to, and you have to understand that you are willfully sending these people who are still protected by the Constitution of the United States into a facility that we all know have issues. So that opens up the city to have even more of a burden if something were to happen, into adding to the deaths that have happened inside that city, increasing that number from 22 since 2015, which is horrible. That's not just City of Portsmouth residents. That's just abysmal as far as what we're talking about in this facility, and 7 wrongful death suits that have been filed in that number. Please find another way, another solution to work out this agreement so that Sheriff Moore retains the custody of these inmates, whether it's going forward with moving them to the regional jail, and then Sheriff Moore and his inmates, like Mr. Goldubiachowski suggested. There are plenty of people that have lives on the line. You have families, a whole lot of them that are in this room, of deputies that are here that will be tremendously negatively affected by this. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Donna Sy. Ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Donna Sy, and I live in the Woodbine Farms neighborhood. Resolution 20-101 is a resolution submitted by council members. This resolution is to authorize and direct the city manager to close the Civic Center jail on or before August the 15th, 2020. The Commonwealth of Virginia has not given authority to the city council legislators to close the city jail by way of the city manager. There are 5 constitutional officers. These constitutional officers are under the Commonwealth of Virginia state law. These constitutional officers are the city treasurer, the commissioner of revenue, the clerk of the circuit court, the Commonwealth attorney, and the sheriff's office. Principles of Liberty number 17 reads, a system of checks and balances should be adopted to prevent the abuse of power. Portsmouth has no system of checks and balances adopted to prevent the abuse of power, as demonstrated by this resolution to close the city jail. The Commonwealth of Virginia's Board of Correction has oversight of local and regional jails. In 2018, the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission directed its staff to study the Office of the State Inspector General, including its role and authority in inspecting and investigating incidences in jail. There are 59 local and regional jails in Virginia. The Board of Corrections established mandatory standards for jails and reviews inmate deaths, and the Department of Corrections inspects jails. The Department of Corrections conducts timely and comprehensive inspections of regional and local jails to assess compliance with state standards that have been developed by the Board of Corrections. Inspectors use standardized, consistent processes and ensure that jails correct any violation. So JLOC recommended to authorize the transfer of current Department of Corrections jail inspection staff to the Board of Corrections, to develop an annual report that summarizes jail audits and inspection results to identify potential improvements in jail operations around the state. If the City Council had issues with the jail's maintenance, the mayor needed to have called the chairman of the Board of Corrections, the Honorable Bernie W. Francis, and filed a complaint. And I wrote to this Honorable Francis to report what is happening here in Portsmouth. Because the city council members have no checks and balances, they are never held accountable for abuse of power. And one way to hold them accountable is to file a recall petition in the circuit court. My assessment of this city council: the elected are using all kinds of tactics to force the sheriff to lay down his honor. The elected are using all kinds of intimidations to force the people to comply with their abusive tactics to increase our taxes to $1.91 per 100 by the Commissioner of Revenue or the City Treasurer. The elected has spent money on studies like HRNA for $132,000 without our consent. Pace Collaborative and Clark Neeson without the citizens' consent. And the reports by Pace and Clark Nielsen are biased to go along with what the city wants. The elected has caused this problem, and the citizens have sat silent during all this time to allow the sheriff and his deputies and his staff to suffer. The city hasn't worried about getting into debt for $60 million for a new middle school. The city hasn't worried about the 52 vacant positions in the police department. The city hasn't worried about the police department being homeless. Finally, the elected continue to use the people for the elected's own personal benefit. What a shame.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is either Arnett or Annette. It might be a typo. McSwain. And ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council members, Dr. Patton. I am Minister Annette McSwain, 107 York Drive, Portsmouth, Virginia. I am representing Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Steering Committee and Church and Community in Action under the leadership of Dr. Milton R. Blunt. And I come right now, and all I can say is they're not my family members. They're not my family members. That must be the thoughts of anyone who would willingly subject inmates to a negligent proven facility. A facility that was considered the deadliest in Virginia for 4 years. About 4 years ago, a jail that is facing possibility of a shutdown because it's not safe to house inmates due to deaths, approximately 68 since 2003, and 22 of them since 2015. A jail that is settling its third wrongful death lawsuit in 17 months. Did I tell you that I am a former deputy sheriff and I am retired out of the city of Chesapeake? So I do know a little bit about being in a messed up jail because I worked in Georgia as well. It is difficult to believe that this issue is being discussed after the judge ordered the jail to be repaired. I understand that there is finances and funds that can be reallocated to build a jail, which would probably be much better than what we're subjecting or trying to subject our citizens to. More importantly, it is difficult to believe that this is considered to be what's best for the citizens. We do know that these inmates, that we call them loosely, are still mostly citizens of Portsmouth in this jail. I stand here on this evening to remind our citizens that when someone cares about our city, they won't usher our citizens into a worse situation than they're already in. They won't fire over 200 employees and not care about where they're going to work or how they're going to feed their kids. When someone cares, they take care of you. Leaders are elected to lead without biases and to take care of the well-being of those individuals who elected them and those who cannot take care of themselves, as our sheriff has been doing effectively during this controversy. This agenda item has nothing to do with the citizens of Portsmouth. It is disappointing that a personal vendetta, dictatorship, and power struggle has infiltrated our local government. It is embarrassing. Portsmouth, we can do better, and Portsmouth, we must do better on November 3rd, 2020, and we must never forget, and I am one who will stand behind the pulpit and consistently remind our citizens of Portsmouth what we're going through. May justice prevail for anything that is done tonight that is not of that court order.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Brenda Joseph, and you have 5 minutes, ma'am.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, those present and those watching through other sources. I'm here tonight to speak in opposition to the closing of the jail. One, you call it decrepit. It was built in 1969. Well, we have schools that were built before that, so if the jail's too decrepit to be housed inmates in, then the school should be too decrepit to have students in. So let's go there. Second, according to the numbers that I researched and found, we pay $66.45 per bed at Hampton Roads Regional Jail per day. That amounts to $16,612 $6,000.50 per day for these beds, occupied or not. That amounts to $6,562,562.50 per year. Okay, 31 million, 47 million. If you take and do immediate repairs and find a way to cancel the agreement with Hampton Roads Regional Jail, take 2 million of that and allocate it to the repairs needed each year, because this will be $6 million back in our budget that we can spend elsewhere. You could then take $1 million apiece and give it to the schools, the sheriff's office, the police department, and the fire department, where every year those 4 groups, we come asking you to give us raises, asking you to fully fund the requests that are being made. That could be done by eliminating this agreement. Hampton Roads Regional Jail is in our city. We shouldn't pay a dime to house anybody there because they're taking up our tax money, because that could be taxable property, and it's not because they're there. We shouldn't have to pay to put anybody there. This is ridiculous for this jail to be done this way. Keep repairs up. You would do it to your house because you wouldn't let your house get like this, and you know it. So don't let the houses of this city get like that I'm responsible for. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is John Jones. John Jones, you have 5 minutes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Madam Vice Mayor and members of council. My name is John Jones. I'm with the Virginia Sheriff's Association. Sheriff Moore is a member, so that's why I'm here. And I'm here to oppose the resolution that is before you. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the history and the regional jail situation across the state. I have a little bit of knowledge about that and how it came about. And it was back in the 80s when the General Assembly looked at jails, and they looked at rural jails mostly. We had jails in Virginia that were 5 inmates, average daily population 20 inmates, 25. And so the idea of regional jails came about. And then the General Assembly said, we want to encourage it more. So they funded them at 50% construction costs. And that lured a lot more of localities in it. The regional jails in the rural areas worked great. You had small counties that participated in the regional jail, and it was a good option. The Hampton Roads Regional Jail is different than every other regional jail. And one of the reasons it's different is because every locality that is a member has its own jail, and they serve as a local jail. What that really means is that all of the sheriffs that run those local jails, they get to choose which inmate they keep in their local jail, and they get to choose which inmate they send to the regional jail. So what happens is the regional jail gets a class of inmate, a class of client, if you will, that's mentally ill, they have issues, they have medical issues, and the cost goes up. So therefore, the service agreement cost is going up. And on the way down here today, I was talking to one of the other sheriffs that is a member of the regional jail, and he predicted it won't be long before the service agreement will reach $100 a day per inmate. So while it may look attractive at the moment, what you'll be entering into is a service agreement that'll be voted on by all of these other localities that are sending the worst of their inmates to the regional jail, and you'll be sending all of your inmates there. So you'll be offsetting their cost. The jobs. Over almost 200 deputy sheriff and support staff position jobs will be lost. And somebody said to me earlier tonight, well, they can go to the regional jail and get a job. Let me tell you what, that's never worked. It's happened in Petersburg, and years ago it happened in Suffolk, and the promises were made, come to the regional jail, and it doesn't work. They don't get the jobs. There are not that many vacancies there, so it's not practical to believe that those individuals are going to be able to get a job. The jails that are in communities also serve as a economical benefit for that community. It means that the families of the inmates can visit locally. They can go to their local jail and visit their family members. It's more convenient. It means that the local services are there. They can go to the local jail. They don't have to travel. It means that the local attorneys won't have to travel, keeping costs down for both the attorneys and the clients. It enhances safety when you have a local jail because you don't have to transport inmates a long distance to get to court and to get back from court. I can show you a list of deputy sheriffs in Virginia that have been killed in the line of duty. And there have been several that have been killed in the line of duty after a judgment in circuit court, and that prisoner and that inmate was on the way back to the local jail. And they make a break, and there's a resulting death in the line of duty. So there have been some recent developments. I want to give you 3 examples. And I know I'm running out of time, but look at Petersburg. They made this decision 3 years ago, and I appeared before the city council there, and they delayed the decision for a while and then went back and closed the jail. Now the sheriff is asking me to come back, let's look at it. They want to reopen the jail because that services agreement has gone up so much. Look at the city of Richmond. They just built that jail. And there's funding available. There's 25% funding available from the General Assembly to build a jail, and Portsmouth is a seat of political influence in the General Assembly now more than ever. And why not take that to 50%? We'll get
Sir,
right there
your time
with
is
it.
up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're now at the point, and I'm going to ask that you allow council to discuss this, so please respect our discussion. For council to discuss the question that's on the floor, which is the motion to adopt the resolution, and the chair recognizes Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, just let me say that this is disturbing to me. I have listened to the discussions with my colleagues, and just like I've heard tonight, you know, this body has an authority, right? We have an authority to close the jail. We have an equal authority to make sure that we do everything within our power to make sure that we protect this jail, or the opportunity to come up with the best solution that we can come up with. When I decided to serve the citizens of Portsmouth in an elected position, I said this to myself, that I was going to lead with a conscience, with fairness, with the opportunity to build relationships based on trust and mutual understanding. I have 3 challenges with what I'm hearing, because I know that we haven't done the work here. When I say we, my colleagues and myself, we haven't done the work that we're supposed to do. But I have 3 lingering issues. First, my first issue is the regional jail and the Department of Justice. I read the report, and I was very disturbed the fact that we have a jail within our city that's violating the constitutional rights of individuals. Second, we don't even have a plan for displaced workers. We're talking about closing the jail down and displacing all these people. You know, I hear the leaders on our team are talking about, well, we don't have a plan for that yet. We'll get to that later. Excuse me. Third, the impact on our citizens and the loss of trust, y'all. See, trust is a big thing to me. The only 2 things I have worth anything in my life is my honor and my word. And if I'm giving up any one of those, then I'm ineffective. As elected leaders, we must make difficult and unpopular decisions. I get that. I signed up for it. Unfortunately, I cannot and I will not vote for this resolution because my conscience and my sense of fairness will not allow me to move forward. When I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I know that we have the authority to do the right thing and to make this the best possible solution for all. In closing, I'm going to say thank you to Mr. John Jones. We needed to hear that. The truth matters, and thank you all for showing up tonight. Lastly, I'm going to say to Sheriff Moore, there are not many people I know with the level of care, concern, and integrity that Michael Moore possesses. And I'm not here for show. I'm here to do the right thing. Thank you all, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Lisa Lucas Burke.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the opportunity to hear this presentation last night, and in the absence of Councilman Glover, who we applaud, who was a committee member with the National League of Counsel in D.C., he didn't hear the presentation last night, but I echo his sentiments. And I had a couple questions for the city attorney, which I'll repeat for this viewing audience tonight. My concerns were, had the information been shared with the judge and the sheriff's attorney? And that answer was no, the presentation that we got tonight. What was the significance of the August 15th, 2020 date? And that was the amount of time, 4 months, that we needed to transfer inmates. My concern was the pending outcome of the Department of Justice report, because it's unconstitutional, and they say it's pending and it's coming. But we as council members who have the option to make the decision haven't seen that yet. My next concern was the court date that comes up this Friday, Friday the 13th, where we've already received an order from the judge to make the repairs. The repairs to this date have not been done. I wanted to defer until at least we receive a Department of Justice report and depending of the outcome for the court case on this coming Friday. Why was the jail left in ill repair for 15 to 20 years? There's been 2 other sheriffs before us that it was never a conversation about, or it was never an option to put on the table for an agenda item. Don't know why, but this is the year that we do this, and that's disturbing to me, especially given that we've already taken down one officer who is of African American color. Why weren't the regular inspections done to prevent failure, the boiler, the sprinkler, the standpipe, the fire pump system, since 2002? We have some culpability. In my business, if we don't do regular inspections, you get cited and you have no business. Why wasn't the jail budgeted into the CIP funds like we do our schools? If we knew that 15 to 20 years we were going to need to replace a jail, why wasn't that made part of the CIP projects? And were there any of the items on the sheriff proposal for the transition considered? And Sheriff Moore, very honorable man, very high integrity, mentioned that the deputies would be lost of jobs. The senior citizens would lose grass cutting and wheelchair services, and the DARE program and the reentry program, which I've been to a couple of those sessions, all of those would be lost. And of course, the biggest concern for me was the discrepancy between the $150,000, the $200,000 amount of the repairs and the $32 million amount of repairs. And I had asked for an independent study to be done. If the sheriff gave us one report and the city gave us another report, get a third report from an independent person and see where we are with that. And because of none of those concerns were not met, I can't feel comfortable moving forward with this, so my vote will be no tonight.
Thank you, ma'am. The chair recognizes Councilman Battle. You need the mic, sir.
At the onset of this operation, I was no. And I've been no through the complete process. I have the citizens in this city in my heart and mind at all times. The greatest concerns that I have, say for instance, if we do move the consumers, as Ms. Phillips was stating, there's liability involved that we can't duck because we know that we are sending them to a place that's not top-notch. So that's a fact. We're not going to duck that. The services. We can't begin to say how important those services are to our citizens. It makes us the Portsmouth family to have those services. Along with that, we talk about racism in the city. And we talk about different ways to quell it, to address it. Personally, I know it's a sickness. One day we'll come to that agreement. But the Sheriff's Department is the number one pedestal in front of the racism card because the sheriff serves and belongs to the people. All the people. He don't cut white lawns, black lawns, he cut people's lawns. So this is very important to the Portsmouth family to keep this jail open. And if you're going to be self-sufficient, you don't give away your jail. We have 5 or 6 different communities in the Tidewater area that have contracts with the regional jail. And none of them are giving away their jail. Not any of them. Okay, we're not through with liability yet. Once we get those consumers there, and that's all we have, don't you think that price is going to ease up with the monopoly involved? We're making a mistake. The figures vary. But if we do this thing of closing this jail, we'll do irreparable harm to our city. So as in the beginning, today and tomorrow, I'll vote no.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion on the floor, which is to adopt the resolution. Any further discussion on the motion? Ready for the question? All in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And Madam Clerk, that motion carries. Okay, we go to any other items submitted by council? We go to report on pending items. Dr. Patton?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, there are no pending items at this time.
Good. We go to non-agenda speakers, and our first speaker is Sergio Neal. And sir, you have 5 minutes. We'll take a 2-minute in-place recess to allow people who want to leave. Sir, if you'll give us 2 minutes. We'll start at 8:30. We're in recess for 2 minutes. Council will come back in order. We're at non-agenda speakers. Our first speaker is Sergio Neal. And sir, you have 5 minutes.
Again, thank you all, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, and the general public. I have to say I'm a little bit, thrown off by what just happened, but, some of you all, we have a person right here, in the back with the mother in that jail. And I feel sorry for my sister. She was over there.
Sir, you have to address council.
She's sitting in the back, and her mother is in that jail. And I'm going to tell her right in front of you all, I am so sorry that her mother's going to have to be put through a situation like this. But I can guarantee you, we're going to work this out one way or the other. It's sad. It's really sad. I wanted to come before you doing non-agenda to give you all the state of the city from the citizens' point of view. First of all, we all saw all the news cameras that just left up out of here. Virginia Pilot reporter is probably, if she's not here, she's probably on her way writing her article right now. Can we think about the amount of embarrassments we've suffered over the very recent times that have been ran through the media? And people like me, you know, that love this city, born and raised here, have to keep reading this stuff over and over again and say, why Portsmouth? You know, I get it, that letter that came out, the council's rebuttal to the article that came out, I get it. Everybody got to say this, save face. Everybody got to say their piece. I get it. But our citizens, we need to write a letter and say how we feel. Because I think all of us, black, white, Latino, anything, are about tired of it now. We can't, how do you think we feel when we come home and people call us on the phone and say, wow, man, Portsmouth in the news again. What are we going to do now? And we got to say, no, man, you know, it's not that bad. You know, we try to sugarcoat it sometimes for someone else, you know, but me, I'm a real person. I'm just going to say it for what it is. I honestly, at this point, you know, I've seen people that are sitting on this dais right now. I've been knowing one person for over 20 years. And I know with her, from when I first met her up until this point, has always tried to be the person, in my eyes, to have a sense of what's best for the situation. But at the same time, too, I'm kind of concerned that some other people are trying to force a decision that should not be made. If this person was to leave this city right now, I'm guarantee you she will walk out of here with her head held high. She was highly regarded from wherever she came from, and when she came to Portsmouth to take that position now, that she has now. I just don't like that at this point her reputation is being ruined by certain decisions that have been made. People have thrown her in the up and down in the news to use her as the scapegoat when they know full well that the decision was theirs, they just passed it along. I mean, I don't know. Somebody help me to understand why we always having to be in this place. What's going to be next? You know, we got our 13 and 14-year-olds in gangs because they don't have the recreation. They can't take full advantage of recreation centers because of the economic strains that have been put on that department. But I was told at the community meeting at Norcom not too long ago that recreation is changing. Well, is it changing that much that we're allowing our 13 and 14-year-olds to be getting gangs now? And to go steal cars from Chesapeake, drive them back to Portsmouth, or steal cars from out here and go drive them to other cities for their lives to be ruined? Is that what we are doing now? Are we dragging our school system through another, this person did this person did that, now it's get back time? Because the formula funding ain't right? That's what we try to do. Is that what we're doing there? I mean, if that's what we're doing, then let me know. You know, somebody said last time that was in here, man that has been regarded highly by some of y'all, I've seen them before. If you don't like Portsmouth, leave. Well, guess what? I'm sorry to say this, and I'm going to say it for what it is. That man will be gone before me, because guess what? I'm 32. He 80-something years old. It's people like me that have to inherit this mess. No disrespect to him. But at the same time, too, what are you all going to do when my generation is fully prepared to absorb this mess? I can tell you right now, being 32, a lot of us are not, and we are in some serious trouble if we choose to stay in this city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Mark Godolgi-Yotrovsky. And, sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening one last time, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of council, and fellow interested parties. Earlier today, I sent you all a copy of the spreadsheet that I'm holding here, in which I took the funding formula that you adopted in great haste a couple of weeks ago that is supposed to rationalize the allocation of funds to the Portsmouth Public Schools. There are several problems with the formula. The first part is the underlying assumption that seems to be implicit in its formulation. The starting point for that formula was the past fiscal year. I don't believe anybody asserted during budget time or subsequently that the amount of money the city provided to the schools was intended to address all their legitimate needs. So it seems to me that starting point was just a convenience and not really an attempt to get to anything that would meaningfully change the level of support for education. Now, education comes up in conversation a lot in this chamber, going back the 24 years that I've lived here, and education is always important until it comes to allocating money to it. So this magic formula, which said that fiscal year 2020's allocation would be the starting point, the benchmark actually for subsequent years, came up with a rather ridiculous number, 30.222822%, rounded. So a little less than a third of local revenues, essentially, is to be devoted to the funding of the schools. When the superintendent and his staff presented the budget proposal for the upcoming fiscal year, they identified about $1.09 million, round numbers, $1.1 million in funding for certain instructional aspects of the budget. But if you read farther along or were paying attention as the presentation rolled out, you see that the needs identified in that document ran to another $8 million. So conversation subsequent to that presentation has focused on the first 1.1 million and has completely ignored the other $8 million embedded in it. So obviously what we have here is a deficient formula. Now, I learned from the Rolling Stones a long time ago, you can't always get what you want. But in terms of funding for education, it's important that you try to ensure that it gets what it needs. And somewhere between that $1 million, $1.1 million, and the $9 million, there is an essential need that's not being met in your formula. The other piece of it I spoke to before, but just to recap, to go into a partnership and then ram through something that doesn't have the approval of your partners makes a mockery of the idea of a partnership. You need to go back to the drawing board. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Brenda Joseph. And ma'am, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening again. I'm coming to speak to you on two issues. I came 2 weeks ago to speak on the school budget formula, which was incorrect. But I turned around exactly at 7 o'clock to turn in my card and was told, you can't register. So I went home and I researched and I was upset, I was mad. And yeah, there's some people that heard me say, I'm not voting for you, and I meant it. Your ordinance that was adopted by the City Council on August 13th, 2019 reads, All requests from members of the general public to address City Council on a subject on the business agenda or on a non-agenda item shall be submitted to the city clerk prior to the calling of the meeting to order. It does not say 7 o'clock, despite what you have on your agenda. Your yellow registration card says, this card must be presented to the deputy city clerk prior to the call to order. Therefore, if you are still in a public work session or have not called this meeting to order, and someone turns around at 7 o'clock, 7:02, 7:05, 7:10, they should be allowed to register to speak. When you do not, you silence the voice of your citizens. And that's not what you were elected to do. You were elected to represent us. You were elected to sit up there and make the right decisions and say, this is the way the city needs to go to move all of our citizens forward so all of our citizens can prosper and do well. And it's not happening. Secondly, on the budget formula for the school system, with the numbers you put out, somebody needs to learn how to round. In elementary school, we teach the children 0 through 4, stay on the same floor. 5 through 9, go up one time. 30.2228 does not round to 30.23. It rounds to 30.22. To make it round to 30.23, you need to add $4,720. You need to add 30 cases of paper. You need to add substitute teachers for several months so teachers who are sick or have sick children can be home to take care of their children or their own needs. It's utterly ridiculous the way this council, and not just the members presently up there, but for years have railroaded the school system with this, because years ago a promise was made. A promise was made that eventually, within about 3 years, the funding would be up to 33%, 1/3 of the annual budget would be devoted to the schools. It hasn't happened yet. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Tony Henrod. And sir, you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Herndon. I'm a business owner in Portsmouth, a citizen of Portsmouth, and I've had a concern that I can't quite get an answer to. I own a skate shop in Craddock, and I've been informed that the fire station will be moving to where the skate park is. And no one can seem to tell me what will be done with the displaced skate park, and what time frame will the fire department be moved. So I was just wondering if you guys have any answers.
Let me finish. Once you're finished.
I'm finished.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. You can have your seat, and I'll ask the city manager to have one of the deputies contact you so that we can get your contact information and give you the information that you're asking for. Okay?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, Mr. Pace will get with the gentleman.
Will you proceed now, Mr. Pace? Or Mr. Baldwin, whichever? Let them decide. If you would do it now, please. With that, we conclude our agenda tonight, and this meeting is adjourned.